Today is Friday, January 28th, 2022, which means it's Whispers Friday. Hello, fiendlings, how the hell are ya? This week was one of the best writing periods I've had in my life. I started the week with Station 3 at 68,000 words, and on Wednesday, I finished the first draft at a whopping 93,500 words. Oh, that was a fuck ton. I've been through the first draft, and now it's with my first beta reader for some quick edits and to make sure I didn't overlook something massive. Once I get those edits back, take another look through it, I'll be sending it out to patrons, Ko-Fi, Buy Me a Coffee members, and etc. at $5 and up. I imagine that by Valentine's Day, Station 3 will be at Severed Press for its final edits and graphics and etc. So maybe the book will be published at the beginning of March. That also means, of course, that yours truly will be recording for the audiobook, which means we have a 30 to 35 episode podcast run starting in late March. Excited? I know I am. If you want to support the podcast, get access to the Black Oceania presentation and advanced reader copies, go to shadowpublications.com, check out my wares, and subscribe. Or if you want to just tip me, hit that Buy Me a Coffee button. Any assistance is greatly appreciated. Before I go, I've been up since 0400 due to dog issues, and the only thing keeping my eyes open is my cup of corpse coffee. Visit corpsecoffee.com, check out their fine array of coffees, boutique teas, and their webcomic, and tell them the Fiend Master sent you. Corpse Coffee, get the dead in your cup. With that, I'm out of here because there is so much shit to do. Be safe, have a great week, and we'll talk again real soon. Here's episode 4, the conclusion of Whispers. The sound grew in volume and soon became a chorus of whispering voices, their syllables jumping atop one another. Their clamoring made it difficult to think, but he kept moving forward. The glow slowly intensified, as if keeping up with the quiet, muddled chatter. He came to a halt, eyes open wide, jaw hanging, when the glow started to shimmer. Whites and blacks danced across the green mist, flickering in and out of amorphous shapes. The whispers slowly coalesced, as did the shapes in the mist. The jagged flashes of black and white light were coming together, a form taking shape. Vaughn stepped backward as the green light collapsed in on itself, leaving him alone in the darkened tunnel with the glowing figure standing at its end. It didn't have limbs, per se, but branches and nubs where they should have been on a humanoid form. The head, if you could call it that, appeared as a misshapen lump of matter. Although it was more than 5 meters away, he could see the figure had no face, no expression. The figure wasn't smooth. It appeared as jagged and rocky as all the tunnel walls.
Oxygen reserves below 5%.
Suit, can you see that?
Please restate your query.
The fucking thing at the end of the tunnel, do you see it?
There is...
Suit's voice cut off with a staticky belch. A bolt of pain hit Vaughn's left ear, quickly followed by another to his right. He fell to his knees as if knocked down by a blow to the back. He couldn't hear the sound of his own breathing, or the thrum of his heart. He couldn't hear anything except the voices that no longer whispered in his mind, but spoke.
Become we now. Save you.
The words jumped atop one another before becoming a single litany spoken by thousands. He closed his eyes against the voices. It didn't help. Instead, the after-image of the glowing figure seemed etched into his retinas, and it wasn't fading. In fact, it was getting larger in his mind, as though it were coming right through his eyelids and into his visual cortex. The branches shortened and thickened, the nubs doing the opposite. The form had 6 arms and 3 legs, its face elongated into a rough diamond shape that had no eyes. Vaughn forced his own eyes open and realized he'd never really closed them, because he couldn't close them. He was paralyzed. The thing before him stepped closer, the voices continuing their promise.
Become we now. Save you.
The creature held up an arm that ended in a flat, bifurcated paddle. An electric blue sphere appeared in its hand and rotated there. Another joined it, and the two merged so they formed a continuous shape, a bonded shape.
Become we now. Save you.
His HUD flashed with warning symbols, critical oxygen alerts, radiation alerts, suit perforation alerts. All of them were fighting over his screen. One even said, missile detected. Suit was probably screaming at him, but he couldn't hear the mechanical voice. He couldn't even hear himself. All he had were the flashing lights on his HUD and the figure lighting the tunnel. The shape in its hand continued rotating, the blue hue vibrating the space around it.
Become we now. Save you.
The figure walked forward and raised another hand. A pair of electric blue spheres appeared, but instead of merging, they stayed apart while a new sphere, a red one, fell into place above them. The two new blue spheres merged with the larger red sphere, one moving to its right side, the other to its left. The resulting shape was a large band of red with smaller half-spheres of blue at its end. The new shape rotated faster than the conjoined blue spheres in its other hand. The new one also looked dangerous, its colors flaring out in jagged fingers of light.
Become we now. Save you.
The figure threw the new shape at the wall where it burst and filled one side of the tunnel with a hazardous crimson, the same color as the critical alerts flashing on his HUD. It flung the blue sphere at the other wall, and that side turned a soft, inviting blue.
Become we now. Save you.
Vaughn rose to his feet, unaware of the blood seeping from his nostrils and the corners of his eyes. The choir sang their words, images and thoughts spreading through his mind along with them. Distant galaxies birthed from clouds of celestial jetsam. Planets of indescribable colors orbited in harmony around their stars, some appearing more as art than actual worlds. He saw light being born, dancing, copulating, photons shedding in orgasmic storms that radiated through the universe, providing a means for life to find a way. The choir hit sour notes, the blue, soothing visions fading into a dim twilight. Countless stars appeared, their light wan and used up, all of them on the verge of collapsing into themselves and taking their systems with them in a shroud of suicidal glee. They went out, one by one. His mind filled with the hulks of long-dead civilizations still standing in arrogant defiance of their world's climate, while the bones of their makers were buried deep beneath the dust and grit that time provided. Flash, more visions. The debris of thousands of starships floating around the remains of a half-shattered planet, its core dark and cold. Things that might once have been sentient drifted along with the fragments of their great death machines for all eternity, or until the nearest star died. Another flash. A planetoid moved past planets, entire star systems, its speed and destination always decided by its interest in nearby phenomenon. A living, traveling arc of knowledge. Now he was inside it. The images and thoughts died, leaving him once again staring at the being. It waited patiently for him as though it had all the time in the universe. It did. In no more than a few seconds, Vaughn had seen lifetimes of observations, each with its own indecipherable voice and thoughts. But he had understood the images clearly enough, not to mention the color of the thoughts. You will see it all, know it all, the good, the bad, the glorious, and the evil. The universe laid bare for all eternity. The side of the tunnel colored in blue had thinned, the crimson encroaching. Suit was probably telling him he was out of oxygen, but he couldn't hear the artificial voice. When the thing, the creature he was currently inside, had reached out to him that last time, it had done something to him. Already his thoughts were becoming muddied. His body ached in ways he didn't recognize, as if the nerves were going out like strings of unplugged Christmas lights. Or maybe his brain was no longer listening for the signals, and all he felt was the ghostly sensation from decapitated limbs. He couldn't hear himself speak, but he did his best to say the right words. The HUD disappeared, leaving him with only the view through the visor. Vaughn reached up to his helmet and put his hands on either side of it. The thing stepped backward from him, giving him room. Vaughn ignored it and entered the shrinking blue side of the tunnel. Once inside the blue light, he touched the release controls. He felt pressurized air leave the suit and popped his helmet with his eyes closed. Instead of the burning sensation of deadly cold, his skin felt pleasantly cool. When he was certain he wasn't in vacuum, he opened his eyes. The thing before him shimmered, and he finally noticed it was translucent. Probably had been all along. Maybe his HUD had made that difficult to tell. Or maybe, he thought, you just wanted to believe it was real.
Become we now. Save you.
The mental voice had a tinge of concern that hadn't been there before. Vaughn looked to the side and thought he understood. The blue light shrouding him was as bright as ever, but it was losing to the red. It wouldn't be long now. A choice, he thought. Join us or die, and not by our hands. We've done all we can. They didn't have the words, couldn't speak his language, but the flood of images that accompanied the alien symbols made it clear. Travel, learn, see. Or cease to exist. Vaughn grinned at the creature. Instead of saying something, he focused on the image of himself entering a command bridge, flight couches filled with uniformed personnel. He imagined sitting down on an empty couch, activating a holo display, and watching. The illusion shimmered again before disappearing. Vaughn narrowed his eyes and stepped closer to the tunnel wall. The blue light had shrunk to less than a rectangular meter around him and seemed to be dissipating with every second. Something tugged at his shoulder. Vaughn tried to turn around, but another something grabbed his other shoulder and held him in place. A flare of panic went off in his brain, but there was no rapid heartbeat or last drop of adrenaline flushed into his system. As far as his body was concerned, he was already dead. The only thing left was the dimming intelligence inside his skull. Somewhere, in a distant galaxy, the nerves in his shoulders and neck were screaming about being sliced apart, about sinew parting from bone. A voice in his mind joined them, that panicked part of him that demanded he fight this, to not let it happen, that it wasn't too late. But that voice was dying along with all his other senses. He looked down and saw that the red light was to his boot tips. Droplets of his blood floated by and disappeared into the encroaching red mist.
Become we now. Save you.
Pressure. Great pressure filled his head until he thought it would explode. It held for a long moment, and then something clicked in his mind. The wonder and terror of all he'd seen and known, all he'd experienced over a lifetime, the part of him that was intrinsically human, spilled out of his mind as if from a breached dam. His thoughts swirled out into a vast and crowded shared consciousness, his mental voice becoming part of the chorus. Thousands upon thousands of alien species, creatures that existed in different realities, welcomed him. He was already learning their languages, learning the common tongues. The planetoid, with its billions of eyes, saw across the envelope of space itself, across dimensions, across it all. An eternity to learn, an eternity to dream. The Vaughn mind that remained, the part that hadn't been consumed, was left staring into the red cloud of his own blood and choking on the deadly CO2 flooding into his lungs. But there was no pain, no concern at all, really. He could still sense his other, the part of him that would live on. Vaughn was still staring into the cloud when his heart stopped. The lights went out in his mind. The tunnel walls slowly sucked in his body, fragments of suit shredding against the planetoid's flesh. When it finished, a single strand of metal fiber was all that remained.